Hello, I'm going to talk to you about the wearing of masks, and I'm reading an article from the British Medical Journal, and well, I want to make a few points about it. There's an article here by somebody called Amy Price. Now, there's no doubt that a terrible tragedy befell Miss Price, Dr. Price. She lost her husband to COVID, and obviously this is going to have a profound effect on her attitude to, the dangers of infection. However, I'm going to switch the subject for a minute to the subject of anorexia. We all know what anorexia is. It's when usually a girl, it's not always, but usually a girl starves herself to death because she has a view of her body that is out of connection with reality. She wants it to be absolutely perfect. But the questions are why people get so affected. And one of the theories is that this is somebody who feels they are not in control of their lives or of some situation, but starving themselves, making their body thin, conquering their feelings of hunger. That is something over which they do have control, and so that gets out of control. This wish to control every last calorie that goes into the body. And I happen to have lost a colleague, a writing colleague, and she was a perfectionist, and she perfected herself to death. It was a terrible tragedy because she was a wonderful writer. Anyway, that's another story. So Amy Price's husband died from COVID-19, and she says she hopes that wearing a mask outside and indoors will protect other families from similar trauma. And as soon as I saw that, I thought of anorexia. I thought of somebody whose whole life went out of control in a most awful way, and now she thinks that by wearing masks she can re-establish that control. And that's the problem, because you see, she isn't the only one. Doctors are paid and trained to heal. When they can't heal, when they're standing there helpless and watching their patients struggling for every breath and dying of complications that they'd never seen before, you can understand that they feel helpless and out of control. And people don't like being out of control generally. So you can see why this attitude is developing among doctors of keeping control of the society. And as governments are leaning more towards them for advice, so they are advising in this way. This is a psychological effect. In this case, well, I was going to say she has paid a terrible price. I know it sounds like a pun, but I can't think of anything else to say. It's not a pun. To lose your husband in such a random way, I can only begin to imagine how awful that felt. But I can also begin to imagine why she would get this idea that if everyone wore masks, this would never happen. Of course it would, because infections will find ways in, whatever. And there are other things that are going wrong in society that are being caused by masks. I'll get to that in a minute. But here, I became interested in masks professionally when our Stanford laboratory director, Larry Chu, and I did some work about masks for the medical professionals and their use in the community. We then teamed up with the World Health Organization and the Stanford professors Stephen Chu and Yi Kui to improve information about masking in the community. 5 nursing friends of my daughter, who is a nurse practitioner working in intensive care, died from COVID-19. And I'm assuming that these friends of her daughter would have been fairly young. So yes, that is a tragedy. Simple community mask wearing helped keep my family virus free until my husband was admitted to hospital with a broken femur. After 4 weeks of negative COVID-19 tests in hospital, he then tested positive and died in hospital from COVID-19. He was alone from the ambulance trip until he died. None of us were allowed to visit even once. None of us was, but yeah, that's beside the point. Now look. 5 nursing friends of my daughter, I assume they caught the COVID from their patients. Now, what's the masking got to do with that? I don't think they got it on the street. I think because they were handling people with a highly infectious illness, possibly at a time before they knew about proper therapies. So I don't see where the mask comes in, except that it's an example of her bringing in yet more trauma. And I understand, I have sympathy for this, of course. In the hope that it protects other families from similar trauma, I wear a mask in public, indoors and outside, as well as physically distancing, avoiding crowds and washing my hands regularly. You see, this is a woman who has become obsessive. She has become obsessive because of this awful set of tragedies that have been surrounding her. I understand that. But I have a friend who is partially deaf. He can't understand anything people are saying to him when they're wearing masks. He has enough trouble hearing them normally, but when they're slightly muffled by the mask and he can't see their mouths, he can't understand them at all. Now, he's a widower, he's been isolated all year, and even when he can go out, he can't talk to people. You think that's not as bad as any illness that he might get? This is terrible. You have to weigh things up. At the moment, with the vaccine therapies we're having, and I know some of you don't agree with me here, but yeah, just leave me with my opinion, please. With the vaccine therapies that have been shown to have reduced the numbers not only of infections but of transmissions and certainly of deaths, then we don't need to wear masks. A friend of my mother's, this was many years ago, her husband died of flu. Actually, somebody else I know, her husband died of flu as well. It's completely unexpected, completely out of the blue and nothing to do with COVID, just flu. We always get these infections. Now, of course, we wouldn't if we all walked around inside plastic bags. But you know, we know there's a limit. She doesn't. She still thinks that we can mask ourselves out of getting infections. But you know what? There are things worse than infections. I'm sorry to say this, but social isolation, people not being able to hear. Even blind people have trouble with masks because that muffles people's voices as well. And blind people rely on people's voices more than most. A face covering does not directly protect wearers from COVID-19 because droplets containing the virus can pass through any gaps between the mask and the face. However, modelling suggests the droplets may travel an average of 5 feet with face covering, but 12 to 30 feet when masks are not worn. This is why physical distancing matters. You see, here we have a woman who is concentrating on the technical aspects of the mask. And she's right, everything she's saying is right. The only problem is we're living in the real world. Now, some of you may have read The Cancer Ward by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I don't remember the name of the surgeon he was talking about, but he was saying that she saw everything in terms of knives, cutting it out. Although there were new therapies for cancer, this surgeon, he said, as any surgeon would, felt that there was no better therapy than by taking a scalpel to whatever was wrong with you. And this is how this woman is seeing the world now. She knows masks help. She concentrates on the technical thing. Here, on the basis of our studies, the World Health Organization now recommends a cloth mask of at least 3 layers of different materials. The outermost layer can be polyester, so that, which is slightly waterproof, so the droplets won't wick in. The middle layer can be polypropylene. I mean, she's going through the whole list of the things you can do. But she is not talking about how masks separate people, how social distancing makes people lonely. She's not talking about that. She thinks she can control the world because she has had chaos breaking over her head, and that's all she can see. But she's wrong. She's wrong. I agree that masks do cut down on some dangers. Yeah. And they cut down on dangers for all sorts of infections, not just COVID-19. But we can't live like that. And that is the top and bottom of it. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the Graniopteryx design or Grambo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.graniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share, share, share.